Visions of Greatness is more than a show. It's a journey into the minds and moments that redefine what's possible. I'm Ira Joe Fisher, and this is Visions of Greatness.
Thanks, Ira Joe. What's up, DT? It's good to see you as always.
Always good to see you too as well, BK.
We have actually, our guest today is actually an old friend of yours who has made an incredible career out of the banjo. He's the first president of the International Bluegrass Music Association. So many other accolades that we could talk about this all day.
Yeah. For one of them, for example, he was just last September inducted into the International Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame with his legendary band called Hot Rise. That's
Hot Rod.
R-I-Z-E.
You have to have the Z. And he worked with Steve Martin, right? He actually sort of worked on his skills with him a little bit and actually got him to play with other players, because I think Steve Martin was just sort of used to play, by himself on the banjo, and Pete Wernick, our guest, kind of got him to jam with other people. And he was also a member of the supergroup Men. They're called Men with Banjos Who Know How to Use Them, which included Steve Martin and Earl Scruggs, who we'll talk about who that is. And he performed on TV in a banjo group with Earl Scruggs and Steve Martin. So they played together a lot, and we'll learn more about that.
Yeah, for those who know bluegrass, Earl Scruggs is a name not to be forgotten, as is Steve Martin and as is Pete Wernick. He also was the first American, apparently it was with his group High Rise, to tour Russia as a bluegrass act. They had never seen a bluegrass act in Russia before.
He also developed something called the Wernick method of teaching bluegrass jamming, which has certified over 100 teachers, offering more than, I think it says here, 1,500 classes in 46 states and 12 countries. He's a busy man.
Yeah, busy guy. And, he doesn't only teach the banjo, and he really wanted to point that out to me. He's known for his training worldwide using the Wernick method, but it's also to improve upon skills of banjo players, guitar players, mandolin players, fiddle, and bass players. Whew.
Wow. I'm exhausted just listening to it. And finally, on top of all this, all these amazing things he's accomplished, this guy survived one of the worst plane crashes in aviation history back in Sioux City, Iowa in 1989, and we'll get into that as well. But listen, enough from you, enough from you and me. Let's get right to him, ladies and gentlemen.
Pete
Pete Wernick,
Wernick.
welcome to the show.
I'm so glad to be on.
Now, first of all, where are you calling in from?
I am sitting on my back porch in Niwot, Colorado, about 10 miles from Boulder in the Rocky Mountains.
Oh, it's beautiful. So, Don, you have a long history with Pete.
Yeah, I'd say there's quite a history. Picture Pete and I on the stage of PS 95's auditorium for the talent show, in which my friend Pete was able to do an outstanding rendition of Elvis Presley. And not to be outdone, I went into my own rendition of Nat King Cole, and that's one of the memories he and I have going way back to maybe age 11 or 12. So this particular special guest that we have, I have a pretty long connection with this guy.
Pete, what
That's
did you
true.
learn from
I
him
don't
that time?
deny any of that.
Well, Pete, we talked about so many of your kind of different accomplishments and struggles, and the show was called Visions of Greatness, and one of the things that we like to talk about is what makes you a vision of greatness. And it may not seem like
That's a hard question to answer with a straight face, because I always try to be great, or I should say mostly try to be great, but that's for other people to decide. But what motivated me in the first place was, spurred on by your peers is a good way to start. And I had very caring parents who were really into education. That helped. And then I got into Bronx High School of Science. I got into Columbia University. And then I was already playing music, and I was very motivated to get some attention. And when you're 14, that's when an awful lot of male musicians start playing, because it's a ticket to attention if you're not good at sports. And I wasn't too great at sports, and I wasn't especially funny or anything. But I figured if I could play the banjo really well, I'd get attention for it. And so I practiced quite a lot there in my teen years, and then I'm proactive in terms of organizing things. So I would organize different bands even when I was in high school and college. And when I got out to Colorado, well, my life story, it includes the fact that I got a doctorate in sociology when I was living in Ithaca, working at Cornell. But on the side, I was playing a lot of banjo, and I was teaching banjo, and I realized there was a need for a banjo instruction book that could play Scruggs-style banjo, which is tricky and not easy to teach. So I had been teaching so much, I wrote a good book, and I was very motivated. I just sat at a typewriter for hours and hours, and I pounded out the best book I could write. And then it sold about 250,000 copies, as it turned out. And then I was able to leave academia, which allowed me to approach my biggest love, which was playing music. When I got out to Colorado, I met some very good musicians. I started this band called Hot Rise in 1978, and just last September, our band was inducted into the Bluegrass Hall of Fame. So that's sort of cutting to the chase. You don't get into the Hall of Fame without being, a lifer and pretty good at what you do. And our band was a darn good band, and it was all based on just being determined. When you really care about something, that's where it starts.
If you could switch places with another person, who would you switch places with?
That is a trick question. I have really given it some thought. I guess I'd switch places with myself at a younger age so I could relive a lot of wonderful times I've had. I'm a very fortunate person, and I'm lucky to have lived the life I've lived.
Well, talking about that, your younger years, who grow when you were growing up, who was your role model?
Well, I have to. Uh, Earl Scruggs is the guy whose banjo playing is miraculous. How he ever figured out how to play the banjo like that, he doesn't know. Nobody knows, and it's a miracle, in my opinion. And I got to know him, and he was a very nice man. And he inspired me first with just his recordings, and that's how I taught myself, just by listening to his recordings. But when I look at my life, the person probably who made the biggest difference was my dad, because my dad was a really hard worker and a really caring person. And uh, he was raised, well, first of all, he was raised by immigrants who had fled the pogroms in Russia. And they were poor, very poor. And he was a bright kid. He had two younger siblings and put himself through college. He had to cross the river from New Jersey into New York City because they had to live in New Jersey because they were poor. And he put himself through college working by day and took all his classes at night. And then he went further. He got a doctorate, not just in education or something, but in mathematics. He became somebody who was asked to write books on math and do lectures, all kinds of stuff. And he did that all working days at jobs that he got through family members, and then put himself through at night. This was during the Depression. And my mother used to say, well, she could put dinner on the table for 19 cents because they were just poor. And he worked so hard. He had two jobs the whole time I was growing up. And he provided very well for the family and just never complained that I working so hard and all that. He just did it. And one time I found out that when he'd be riding the subway trains, he would actually read the dictionary. And anytime I asked him for any word, what it meant, he would give me the etymology of it as well. And he could identify plants by their Latin names. I mean, he was a smart guy. I thought there was nobody smarter as I grew up. And then I realized, well, there weren't too many people smarter than him. Our classmate Henry Laufer, that Don and I have talked about, he's really smart too. But anyway, just his drive, and also being a very caring person. He really cared to raise kids who were good kids and did the right thing and all that. So that's part of why I consider myself so lucky, is having that guy to not so much model myself after, but just be inspired by. You can really get a lot done if you work hard.
That's a great answer. Uh, is there another talent that you have that we don't know about?
There's probably a few, but
Well, give us one or
there's
two.
one thing.
Come on, Peter.
You know who Levon Helm was, right?
Oh yeah.
Up on Cripple Creek, she sends me. If I sing a leak, she mends me. See, I can kind of imitate him. Not that good. I don't know if I can do this, but I have a funny way of walking that somebody taught me in college. This is the way Levon Helm sings. This is like that guy's grandpa would walk. Well, but people
Speaking
know
of
I can do
banjo,
that.
speaking of banjo, would you be willing to play us a few licks?
Sure, sure.
Go for it.
It just happens that I have it right here.
Right here. Now, Pete, like to me, so I'm a musician. I play drums and guitar,
This is
but
the drum. See?
the drum and the guitar. But to me, I've always wanted to play banjo, but it seems so incredibly difficult.
All right. Well,
Is
then
there
I'll.
is there a trick to learning it for someone who maybe
Yeah,
wants to
it's
pick it
called
up?
practice. It's a wonderful thing. And it's under the radar. Bluegrass is not contaminated by the involvement of big corporations, like has happened to many kinds of music.
Oh yeah.
It's a wonderful community. It's worldwide. There's people who make a nice living, live in real houses, and travel the country playing bluegrass. And I got to be one of those people for a fair number of years in my life.
Can you talk a little bit about your friendship with Steve Martin?
Well, yeah, of course, everybody admires him. He's such an amazing person. And I was reading in Banjo newsletter, he was getting interviewed and he starts talking about me. He didn't know my name, but he says, the guy in Hot Rise, oh man, I love him, blah, blah, blah. So I thought, he would probably like to meet me. So a mutual friend, John McEwen, who's from the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band and grew up with Steve. He's a mutual friend, so he basically put me in touch with Steve, and he wanted to get together with me. And uh, it turned out, and he wanted to have a music party, but at the music party, he didn't want to play anything. And I knew that he was working on really difficult stuff, and he was spending a lot of time in his trailer in the movie sets and whatnot. That's how he discovered Hot Rise, and he says the guy in Hot Rise, you know. Anyway, but he didn't play with other people at all. Only played by himself, which is not the usual way for banjo players. You can, but anyway. So I said, "Hey, you really use some instruction about playing with other people. Would you like that?" He says, "Oh yeah." So I said I could do a banjo camp at your house, and so he flew me out to Beverly Hills, and I had some friends out there, and then he was friends with Martin Mull, who was a neighbor of his who played
Oh
guitar.
yeah.
Martin came over, and we jammed for a couple of days. And Steve caught on very well. He's a quick study, and he's a perfectionist also, which is usually very good. And anyway, so we just, I sort of brought him into the bluegrass world. He didn't know anybody in the bluegrass world except he had met Earl Scruggs, from early things that had to do with his career. But uh, he really enjoyed the bluegrass community, and then he started playing with other people, and he got a band that wanted to play with him, and he wanted to play with them, and he had a whole career as a bluegrass musician, and he's still always very grateful to me whenever we think about it. He says, "Oh, I don't know what I would have done without you," blah blah, and I was just honored that I could help a person of his true greatness uncover some things about himself that rewarded him and a whole lot of other people that really, as they say, raised all the boats in the bathtub when Steve started bringing a lot of attention to bluegrass. And he's a quality guy and he plays quality music, and no excuses like I can get away with it by being funny. In fact, I told him, look, if you don't smile when you play, people will think you're in a bad mood. And indeed, he played on American Idol, and he played with one of the contestants. And on the banjo forum the next day, people say, it looks like he was in a bad mood. Maybe he didn't like the singer or something. And I quoted that stuff back to him. And I said, see, if you're not, you have the best smile in the world. You and Eddie Murphy have the two best smiles. And if you don't flash that smile sometimes, people think, what's the matter, Steve? Is there a problem, you know? So he actually brought, at first he wouldn't play anything but his music. And then I said, if you don't show a little humor, you're going to disappoint people. Sorry, but I think that's the case. And so he brought it all together, and his show with Martin Short is just great. It's funny, and there's good music in it.
Yeah, he rocks the band. Doesn't that feel good to like have kind of spread like your passion and to tell someone in his, I'm sure people are very nice to him and don't tell him like it is. And you're
Oh, I
just
tell him like it is.
right. He
He
must have
actually, one
appreciated.
time he says, look, I'm going to a roast for Vince Gill. I'm going to try out some jokes on you. And we're just sitting there together. So he tries out that jokes. The first one was really funny. It was a little risque, but the next one, I said, no, that's bad taste. You really don't want to do that. So he didn't do it, you know. And then one time I said, he was saying what a hassle it is to go on TV and have to have a whole band there and have everybody show up and rehearse and do all this stuff. When he's plugging a movie, all he does is talk about the movie and they play a clip. So I said, well, here's a better way to do it. Uh, just sit on the couch, have your banjo handy, and just talk with the person. And then when they say, oh, would you like to play something from your latest record? You say, I'd like to, but I didn't bring my stereo. And he said, oh, that's good. Can I use that? And I said, well, sure. And actually, it's a lot more magical when a guy just picks up an object and starts making this music thanks to what he does with his hands. That's much more amazing to people than you going over and playing with five people and they're all professional musicians and it sounds like a group. People have seen that already, but seeing somebody pick up an instrument and make it do wonderful things, and so he started doing doing that, you know. So yeah, I value my relationship with him very much, and he has lots of, he knows everybody, and but it's nice that I sort of have some of his time and get to see what he does, because when you're around a person of that amazing set of talents, and he's still a regular. I mean, he's a regular guy. He's a guy, and he's a very nice person. Thank goodness. And but when you're around somebody like that, you just want to watch and see what they do. That's why you're doing this kind of series right now, because you get people, and if the viewer gets to know the person, that's an interesting thing. Sometimes more interesting than just seeing them do their usual thing that they're so good at.
Well, now I was going to say, now that we've kind of got to know you and your background, I do want to hit. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to go back to the plane crash. So one of the most famous plane crashes of all time was in 1989 in Sioux City, Iowa,
It
and
was
you were on the plane.
It was quite a day, shall I say. And I wrote, years later, I wrote a song about it because I had, recurring dreams. They were tough at first, but then I would retrace the day. So in this song, I just retraced the day, and it's a normal day. Get on a plane. It's a full DC-10. In the song, it says 296 went through the gate, leaving Earth with few goodbyes. And one of the recurrent lines in the song is, you never know when you could die, which of course is true, and people don't think about it, but this is a perfectly nice July day, and we see the movie, and we're eating food, and then there's a big bang at the back of the plane. The rear engine has exploded, even though it was 19 years old and had functioned perfectly. A small flaw in the fan disc caused the fan disc to rupture and explode the engine, rocked the plane, and the shrapnel from the explosion pierced the outside of the plane and severed all three of the lines of the hydraulic system. And the pilots soon discovered that they had no way to control the plane the way they usually would, and they figured out the only way they could do it was with the thrust on the left engine and the right wing engines. And the plane wanted to circle. It had lost the part of the tail. And the passengers were thankfully not informed of the extent of the damage. They just said, well, we lost the engine. We're going to have an emergency landing in Sioux City. When we get near there, we'll want you to take the brace position. And a movie just came out. It's something about, has the word hydraulics in the title. It's a 45-minute thing, and it's the best presentation in 45 minutes of what actually happened in the cockpit. And there's some things that are not accurate about it, but they did a lot of research, and they had to figure this stuff out and know that they had 296 people on board, and it was Children's Day. There was a lot of kids on board because there was a discount for kids. And a lot of people kind of figured out that they were in grave danger, and a lot of people like me didn't quite realize that. And we weren't informed we were in great danger. That's one of the things that's wrong with this movie, because in the movie, the pilot says to everybody on the loudspeaker, this is a very dangerous situation or something like that. But he didn't say that. He just said it's going to be a rough landing, which it certainly was. And anyway, the plane, the pilots with incredible skill managed to get it to the Sioux City airport and line it up with a runway. It was very hard to control. And the nose dipped down, the wing tilted, and the plane flipped over, going well over 200 miles an hour because there was no way to stop the plane. They were going to expecting to be stopped by the cornfield surrounding the airport, and it was 8-foot tall corn in July in Iowa. And that's not how it happened. It just flipped over, broke into pieces, burst into flames, or not burst into flames, but there was fire, and eventually a lot of stuff burned. And I was with my 6-year-old son, who's now 43, and my wife, and we were sitting together. And luckily, we kept our heads, and we ended up upside down, walked out of the plane on the ceiling of the plane, and it was broken in places. So we got out. Next thing I know, I'm in a cornfield. Everything's very quiet. I'm holding my 6-year-old son.
God.
And I realized that people must have just died. But I didn't see anybody die because in the center of the plane where we were, everybody was still in their seatbelt and got out of there and walked out, more or less on the ceiling of the plane. And the 112 people who died were in first class and in the back of the plane, not in the part that we were in. So there I am with my son. I don't even know what state I'm in. If I look up, I see sky. If I look down, I see the ground. If I look anywhere else, I see nothing but corn. And I got a 6-year-old kid in my arms. So I start trotting away. Eventually, I put Will up on my shoulders. He sees people far down at the end of the cornfield, so we head that way. And then from then on, we're rescued people who were not especially banged up too bad. And then we find out all about what just happened. And there's people in various places who hear about the crash. It looks like everybody must have died. So the word gets out that Pete and his family have died. So I still encounter people sometimes who, for a number of minutes until I called my agent an hour after the crash happened, I said, Keith, it's Pete. And he had a very deep voice and he went, Pete, because he had been crying. He thought I was dead. Anyway, so that's a very capsule version of what there could be a whole book about.
Yeah, I am so sure there's just so much more, obviously, to that. But I just,
there is a whole book, and it's called Flight 232, and it's extremely well researched. And I don't know anything in there that's not accurate. It's by Lawrence Gonzalez, and big thick book, and even goes into the metallurgy that caused the cracking in the fan disc and all that.
Yep.
Well, this show would be complete without asking you the important question about our show, Visions of Greatness. What is your definition of greatness?
Well, that really is a wonderful question, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I thought, well, anybody can be great if they really care about something enough to really get good at it, whatever it may be. And there's so many different things that people can be good at, and they can be great at painting a house, or great at juggling, or whatever. and that's great, a great skill. But greatness is more, I think, of a personality thing. And I think to really be a great person or be called great, the person should lead an exemplary life as well and do what they can to follow the golden rule, lift up people. And if they're that kind of person and they're a great juggler or house painter, that's worth, maybe nobody knows about them except their family and people, but that's a great person. Now, if the person has a public life and a lot of visibility and can get attention, that person could be really great by being exemplary in a public way, like Bill Gates giving a ton of money to charity and for world health. I think that puts other billionaires to shame who are too busy buying extra yachts and things. I think the example of greatness is part of what greatness really encompasses, I think.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time and
It's a real honor being on a show with the other people you've already had, and I appreciate people spending the time to listen.